about all things fit related, being fit, being positioned on a bicycle. I speak with other fitness professionals about some of the challenges we see. Today, I'm very lucky to have James Wilson here. James is from Colorado, and he is the inventor of the Catalyst pedal. It's an amazing mountain bike pedal, which we're going to talk a lot about that day. And he's the founder of MTB Strength Training Systems. James has a big history in strength training and how that applies to the bicycle. So here we go. Welcome along, James.
Greg, thanks for having me on your show, man. I really appreciate it. It's been a while since we've chatted, but yeah, man, last time we talked, we had a great conversation that people are still referring to back to years and years later. And so maybe we can live up to that again.
Yeah, I was trying to place when that was. What was the date on that?
Man, I don't know. I don't know, to be honest with you. It was many, many, many moons ago. I remember, because yeah, you and I met at a functional movement screen certification, if my memory serves me correctly.
Level 2, I think. Yeah, level 2 down in Santa Clarita.
Yes, at Results Fitness, and you and I were talking, and I was like, "Hey, man, this is really interesting. You're a bike fit guy, and yet you're here at the functional movement screen certification. So obviously you think a lot differently than most other bike fit guys." And we started talking about some of my ideas about, training and stuff like that. And definitely had a lot of crossover with some of our ideas. And so, yeah, that led to the podcast interview. And that was actually, it was during that podcast that you planted one of the seeds in my head that helped create the Catalyst pedal. Pointing out some of the things about like the foot position when your foot is coming off of something versus when it's not coming off of something. And you were the first person who really pointed that out. And it's like, well, yeah, okay, that makes sense, because that's why we keep our feet flat in the gym, but we are push through the toes when we run, and there's a difference there. But how that applies to the pedal stroke. But that was, again, one of those, there was many, many things that kind of came together in this moment of inspiration for me one day for the Catalyst pedal. But that was one of them. So yeah, man, you've always, I've always remembered that conversation. So yeah, it was fun.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah. And I'm a big believer in the Catalyst pedal. I run it on my single speed mountain bike, and I run them on my commuter bike as well. And yeah, they've been fantastic. And it's always because the Catalyst pedal it's an evolution of something. There's nowhere I don't go where people don't see one of those bikes and go, wow, what's that pedal? Why is that pedal the way it is? And it doesn't look that different. When I look at it, I'm like, it just looks like a pedal, and it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people are so used to seeing something different that it really throws them. So that was that's really interesting. So let's talk a little bit about your journey as well. So you're a strength coach. You're a cycling coach. You work predominantly in mountain biking. You're still based in Fruita?
Yep, out of Fruita, Colorado. Yes.
Seems like a horrible place to live if you want to ride mountain bikes.
Well, unfortunately, everybody found out about it, and
it was a well-kept secret there for a while, right?
Yeah, it was a very well-kept secret for a while, but we are becoming more well-known. So, along with that comes more mountain bikers, which is good to see people getting out on the trails. But yeah, no, it's becoming a little bit more popular.
Excellent. So, tell me a little bit more about your history from a strength training standpoint.
Yeah, I think like a lot of guys, I got my first taste of strength training in high school. Well, really before that, like, middle school, out in the garage. My dad had one of those old Sears weight sets with the cement weight plates, covered with plastic. And, what else are you supposed to do but do curls and bench press with those things? But I just basically wanted girls to look at me. I wanted to put on some muscle. I wanted girls to look at me. And notice me. And so that was my first motivation. And so I started working out, and I really started to get into, reading the muscle magazines, and just my personality at the time. I didn't realize it wasn't normal to get really obsessed with things like I do sometimes. And so I remember in math class one time, like the teacher's up teaching something, and I'm in the back of the room trying to like figure out the perfect body part training split. If I move this exercise here and this exercise here, and I was really into it. And And so I also started to run track in high school. And that was when I got exposed to using strength training for something other than just, building muscle and bodybuilding type stuff. And, I'm sure, Greg, you remember back when we were younger, strength training was bodybuilding. Like they were pretty much this one and the same. And so track was my first exposure to this idea that you could use strength training for something else, that you could use it to enhance your performance in something. And so, I had good luck with that. Stopped running track, was looking for something else to do. At the time I was working for the International Sports Sciences Association, one of the, certification groups out there, and they were based in Santa Barbara where I lived at the time. And so when I took their certification test, I went in to talk to them. They have an 800 tech support line that you can call, but I was like, well, I'll just go in and talk to these guys. And so it turns out like Charles Staley was working there at the time, the guy behind escalating density training. There's a guy named Joel Sinnott, who was a national level Olympic weightlifter working there. And so I got to know these guys and I did really well on the test, and they offered me an internship position, which eventually turned into a paying position working in the tech support department. So my job for a couple of years was to basically know everything there was to know about training, because if a trainer called with either a question on their test or they called with a question about a client or a supplement or anything, I either needed to know the answer or know where to find the answer. So pretty intensive education in that way. But like I said, I got into mountain biking a little bit through the back door, because parking in downtown Santa Barbara was and still is atrocious. And so I didn't live too far from the office. And I was like, man, I can just ride a bike there. So I started looking at a bike, and I ended up going in a shop and picking out a mountain bike, because I was like, man, a mountain bike, that looks like a BMX bike. And I thought road bikes looked a little weenie. And so I was like, I'll go with the mountain bike. It looks, like what I rode as a kid. And so I bought the bike and I really just rode it to work. I rode around the street some. I was having fun on it. But I didn't really take it out on the trails. It was just for transportation. And then finally one weekend I got really bored, and I knew there were trails behind Santa Barbara. I didn't really actually realize they were like world-class, some of the best in the nation type trails. Right. And so I went and found a fire road and pedaled up and down the fire road, and I was hooked. I was immediately hooked. I tell people mountain biking is so great because it's this blend of an endurance sport and an action sport. Right? Like you get the endurance high, the runner's high, you've got that aspect of it, but then you get the action side of it when things start getting fast and a little crazy. So, if an endurance sport and an action sport, got drunk one night and got it together, mountain biking would have been the baby. And so I loved it. And so but with my background in track, I was like, okay, what do I need to do to change my workout programs now? Because one of the fastest ways to get better at something is to train for it and to use your strength training for that purpose. And so I started looking into mountain bike specific training, and this is back in 2000 is when February of 2000 is when I bought my first mountain bike. And so I'm looking around, and I work for the ISSA. I've got all these resources, and I couldn't find anything. I mean, again, like no offense to like Joe Friel, but like Joe Friel's Mountain Bikers Training Bible was pretty much it. And I'm looking through that and I'm like, this is bodybuilding crap in disguise. Like, 3 sets of 10 on the leg press and leg curl and leg extension. Like, what the hell is this? This is not how athletes train. And so I just started applying the things that I was doing. I knew, how athletes trained from my experience as a track athlete, and then also just through my education with the ISSA. So I started applying those things to my own training, trying to think like, okay, what are the physical demands of mountain biking? What can I do in the gym to try to, work on that? And so, so I started developing a system. I started having some of my riding buddies working out with me. They were getting good results. And then eventually around 2005 is when I got the idea like, I wonder if anybody else would be interested in this mountain bike strength training stuff. I guess I'll get a website and put it up and see what happens. And so, I've been on the internet since 2005, and I still don't know where those first newsletter subscribers came from. Just all of a sudden, there was some people signed up on this newsletter subscriber list that service that I was using. I'm like, man, I guess I better put something out. I got people on this list. And so I started sending out email newsletters, and I got the Bike James blog going. And pretty much since 2005, I have put out a 2 to 3 times a week email newsletter. For many years, I was creating 2-3 pieces of new content a week. I was just obsessed with trying to help people understand how they could use strength training, mobility training, mindset, like all these things that you do off of the bike. How can you use these things to enhance your experience and your performance on the bike? And so really my goal was to create the resource that I wish I had when I first started riding. I wish bikejames.com existed when I started riding. I could just go right there and boom, I got all this information at my fingertips, but that's not how it was.
DeLorean, man.
What's that?
You need to buy a DeLorean.
Yeah. I know, man. I know that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly, man. If I could tell myself where some of these trends were going. But anyways, I know imagine going back to 2000 and telling people about e-bikes. Right. But anyway, so nothing against e-bikes. I'm just saying it's one of those things that back then you would have been like, what? You'd be able to make a bike with a motor that weighs less than 50 pounds and, rides well. Like it just, so, things have definitely changed quite a bit since then, but
yes, similar to that, my transportation to the studio each morning is a one wheel. So
nice.
I got a one wheel, and I still smile all the time because it's like I'm from the future, right? I'm on the single wheel balancing magic carpet thing. Dude. I carve on my way to work, and it's like 5 miles up the road, and people are like looking at you, and you can't help but have a huge smile on your face. But who would have thought, I've got this thing, and that's this evolution of. So yeah, you were a trendsetter, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to, toot my own horn, but before I came along, there were no mountain bike strength coaches. There was no one who was really dedicated. There may have been some strength coaches who would do some mountain bike work with mountain bikers if they came to them, but you didn't have somebody who was dedicated to working with mountain bikers. Again, cycling oftentimes is a code word for road cycling, right? So you would get a cycling coach, and he would help you with your mountain bike program. But it's like, but this guy doesn't understand the physical realities of mountain biking. And so there's differences in mountain biking and road biking. And that was really one of the things that I tried to do, because that was and they still run into this problem. Back then, if you wanted to do some sort of mountain bike training, you would just get a road bike workout and follow it.
Right.
And so one of the things that I really try to do is help people understand, like, what are the physical differences between mountain biking and road riding? And then how can we train to better, prepare ourselves for the realities of the trail? And so, strength training, mobility training, those things come in real important. I remember, kettlebell training, again, people just take this stuff for granted, but man, I worked really hard to help introduce and popularize kettlebells with mountain bikers. Again, you look before I came along, and like really no one was talking about kettlebells and mountain bikers. I mean, I've been working with kettlebells since 2005, which is actually a pretty long time to work with kettlebells, period.
Right.
But start talking about kettlebell swings for mountain bikers, Turkish get-ups, a lot of these things that people today, if you came into mountain biking within the last 5 years, you might assume that this is how it always was. Because there are, several coaches out there now that specialize or work with mountain bikers. And so the field is growing and expanding, and the information is there. But again, you go back in time 15, 20 years, and there was nothing. And so, I feel like, I definitely played a role in helping to progress the mountain biking sport in general by helping to get the strength training side of it up and going.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting sort of parallel to, like, if you're young coming into the sport now, you're young chronologically, not new to the sport, right? Not a middle-aged guy who's just gone out and bought a mountain bike in COVID. But if you're young coming into the sport, the possibilities for you to develop, and I think we're starting to see that now. We're seeing a lot of young athletes who've really benefited from. And I think if we look, we've got a generation who are just turning professional now, whether that be in mountain bike, on the road, or cyclocross, who have benefited their entire cycling career from these great advancements, so back in 2005, early 2000s, these were young kids who were just starting to get on a bike, and they've had the benefit of all these things. And that's why we're seeing these amazing performances now from young cyclists who are maturing, because they do have this really great foundational base of everything, and they've benefited from. You and I talk about, kettlebell swings. It's like really normal for us, but still we forget that for a lot of the population, a kettlebell swing is something which is completely foreign to them, or their understanding of a kettlebell swing is an American kettlebell swing, not foundational Russian stuff. You and I are both, Russian. I'm a Russian hard style, and you've worked with kettlebells for a very long time. So when we talk about exercises like the Turkish get up, which dates back 5,000 years, it's that exercise goes back a long way. And then kettlebell swings and using the kettlebell in different ways, it is still very foreign to a lot of people. And so that's what sort of encourages me to always try and get the word out, get education to people about these different methods which aren't new, but they are part of a foundational toolbox, and for every cyclist should be able to leverage.
Yeah. No, I know exactly what you mean, man. Sometimes I take it for granted as well. Like I got one of my buddies that I do jujitsu with. We've got a podcast we do called Grumpy Guy BJJ, and I got to constantly remind that guy that, dude, you're not normal, right? Like we're not normal. Like, we take so much for granted that like we know this stuff and we think everyone knows this stuff. And it's just not the case. And so, yeah, I think that's one of the things that people, coaches and people that work in the education field constantly got to remind themselves of, is that, is the things that you take for granted are like revolutionary ideas to a lot of people out there. So,
and almost fringe. People are like, oh, I don't know whether I'm prepared to try that. That sounds a bit fringy. Or
yeah, no, I know. And obviously kettlebell training has come a long way since 2005.
What is magic you speak of?
What's that?
Yeah, for sure. So how does all this, when we talk about movement and how we've been applying strength, let's talk about how that related to your thought process behind the Catalyst pedal.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Cause or a good question. The Catalyst pedal was a good idea. So really, man, I can't really pinpoint exactly when, but I've had these kind of epiphanies along the way with my career. And one of my epiphanies was that, and again, it sounds simple when you say it, but we need to look at how the human body optimally moves, and then we need to apply that to the bike. And again, it sounds simple, but that's not the way that people generally go about looking at moving on the bike. They come up with some sort of theory based on how they think that things should work, or how like a machine would power a bike or something like that, without actually looking at and understanding how the human organism itself moves and operates. And so, that's really been one of the central messages that I've tried to get across to riders, is that you've got to improve how you move off of the bike so that you can move better on the bike. And that application of efficient functional movement is going to lead to the greatest increases in performance with the least amount of wear and tear and the least amount of effort. Like that's the whole idea. And so the Catalyst pedal came about because, again, I'm thinking in these terms of, how does the human body move and how do we optimally apply it to the bike? And, I was like a lot of people, I was really inspired by the book Born to Run. I had suffered from problems when I ran track and cross country. I remember they were about to fit me for orthotics, but like I couldn't afford them. So, luckily, looking back, I didn't get them. But so I really identified with what that book was saying about how the foot is this wonderful mechanism, this awesome thing. But if you let it function the way that it's supposed to, then it'll treat you well. And if you try to outsmart it, it will screw you over. And so I became, a barefoot training advocate. In my gym, I'd have people work out barefoot or with minimalist shoes and all that stuff. And so I was on the trail one day and I was like, man, why don't I need stiff-soled shoes in the gym? Like, why is it I can go in the gym and I can lift all this weight barefoot, but I get on my bike and my foot turns into this weak, unstable mess where I'm either having to get like super sticky rubber, or I've got to attach my foot to the pedal, or, whatever it is. It's just, it's just, I got to deal with my foot kind of either attach the foot to the pedal, or I got to deal with it kind of moving around a little bit. Right. And so really good flat pedal riders, they get good at dealing with those little bits of movement that happen, but there's still some movement that happens as you're riding. Like for me, my left foot would always, get a little bit out of whack, and then I'd have to readjust it, and then it'd get a little bit out of whack. And so, I'm like, man, why don't I need stiff-soled shoes in the gym to help me, with my feet? And I had this epiphany. It was like, well, it's because the ground supports both ends of your arch, right? The arch is one of the strongest forms in nature, but only if you support both ends, and you destabilize one end and the whole thing falls to crap. And so that was my insight, was like, oh, and again, going back to what you had mentioned when we had first talked about how people get confused about the pedal stroke because they, the idea is that it looks like running or walking, and so therefore you should push through the ball of your foot, because when you push through the ball, that's what you do when you're running or walking.
That's what you do when you squat in the gym, right?
No, yeah, well, that's the thing. Again, you were the first guy to really kind of point that out and make me realize, like, oh, okay, that's what's going on here. Your foot and lower leg literally act differently depending upon the context. Right. And the context is the foot staying in contact with what it's on, or is it breaking contact with what it's on? And the answer to that question gives you the context, and that's going to dictate how the foot wants to operate. And so if your foot is breaking contact with what it's on, if you're you're running, jumping, even Olympic lifting, like people get confused because Olympic lifters jump, like they break contact with the ground, like
explosive movement, a violently explosive movement.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, one of the cues is to slam your heels back down on the ground. Like there is a moment in time where your foot breaks contact with the ground when you're doing a snatch or power clean. And so that changes the context. And so you do need to push through the ball of your foot.
Sorry, James. Also, Olympic lifting has a definite start and finish point. Yeah. Whereas cycling does not. Pedaling a bicycle doesn't have a start and finish point because it's cyclic and we're doing 90 RPM a minute. That's where cycling was one of the points in which cycling is so different.
Yeah, the context. That's one of the things, man. People don't really like. As I've gotten, along in my career, I've realized that context is everything. If you don't understand the context of what we're talking about, then you can be talking about two completely different things. And so like, what is the context? So if you're talking about how should the foot operate on the bike? Well, what is the context that we're talking about? Like you're saying, it's a cyclical movement, but it's different than a lot of cyclical movements because your foot is staying in contact with what it's on. And so again, like a lot of cyclical movements that people think about, like running, for example, and so they're like, oh, you got to push through the ball of your foot when you run. And it's like, well, no, your foot's not coming off the pedal. So your foot wants to actually maintain more of a balanced position. Like one of the things that I've come to realize, it's not foot position. It's a single pressure point system or a double pressure point system. All right. So the question is, you have a platform. Okay. It's centered on a rotating axis.
Well, hang on. Hey, let's just stop. Yeah. Let me jump in and because this is really good stuff. And I think we're going to give this some context.
Yeah.
You explaining what the Catalyst pedal is and how it is so different from what was out there.
Yes.
And then let's loop back on this and talk about this.
Sure.
Biomechanical aspects of pedaling.
Yeah.
Which will really go, people will get an aha moment where they see that, okay, that's where the biomechanics interface with this mechanical device.
Yes.
To give me optimal performance. So tell us.
Let me grab a pedal real quick.
Might have one out back somewhere,
Yeah. Let me grab one. I just got to jump to the closet real quick. So sorry for the not being better prepared. But
So one of the things he's talking about while he's over in the back room over there, finding is how your foot is supported on the pedal. So it's basically, we've dealt with, pedals of bicycles have been a certain design for quite a long time. And then we had the progression to what everybody calls clipless pedals, which is actually clipped pedals. It's very confusing for someone who's new to cycling. We moved away from flat pedals to this clipped pedals. And the belief was that having a clipped pedal would give you some level of mechanical advantage. And we're going to dive in and talk about that as far as pedaling mechanics is concerned later on. But let's go back and have a look at James and what it is about the Catalyst pedal that makes it different from any of the other flat style pedals on the market.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Yeah. And, it's funny, just kind of, before I get into the pedal, I've been known for quite a while, even before I came up with the Catalyst pedal, as the flat pedal guy.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
Like there's a document that I put out there, the Flat Pedal Revolution Manifesto, that's been around the internet probably about 20 times now. And again, there's arguments and studies and things in there that I really first helped bring to light and popularize that people just quote now, again, without even really knowing like where these things came from. So
they actually quote like the difference between James Wilson and Bike James. Like Bike James is this sort of enigma as far as flat pedals are concerned. And it's sort of like QAnon, right? They don't know whether Bike James is one guy or a group of guys.
Bike James is like Tyler Durden. He's my Tyler Durden is what it is, man. Yeah, I hear stories about Bike James. Like Bike James was riding clipless pedals and fell over at a stop sign and then got pissed off and went off to prove clipless pedals were wrong, so he never had to ride clipless pedals again. This is what Bike James did. I've read this in several places, and I'm sitting here looking at it like, well, Bike James is a dick. I don't know what this Bike James guy's doing, but that's not what happened. I mean, I was there. And I love when people try to tell me what happened. They argue with me about my own history with this stuff. It's like, I was there, guys. I know what happened. And that's not what happened. Like a lot of people, again, just backing up my own history with this stuff. When I got into mountain biking, I was told, like everybody else, you're going to need clipless pedals. And so you need to go ahead and get clipless pedals and start learning on them. And I got my bike shop put some old Shimano DX, like the, caged clipless pedals that had a little flat cage around it. And so what I would do is I would ride my tennis shoes on the trail, and then I would ride some clipless pedal shoes to and from work, because I'm trying to train myself to, again, if you've never, like Santa Barbara is very rocky, very gnarly terrain. It's not where you want to be learning to ride clipless pedals. And so I was trying to learn how to ride clipless pedals, but I wanted to ride the trail. And so, I'm having a lot of fun. I'm actually doing pretty good with my, setup on the trail, but I'm like everyone else thinking I'm losing something. I need to clip in. And so I was actually riding with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife. And we did, I was rolling up to a stop sign. I knew that I had to stop and get unclipped, and I still fumbled it and fell over. And I was like, man, if that was on the trail, I would have died. That I gotten really hurt. And I don't want to do that. I was like, I'm having way more fun just riding my flats or, riding my tennis shoes. So here's what I'm going to do. I was lucky enough to have a riding buddy who rode flats. And so I was like, I can get at least as good as him. Like, I know that you can get at least that good, and he's better than me, and he's on flat. So I know that I can get that good on flat. So my thought process was that I would just use flats and work on my skills and stuff like that. And when I got to the point where I felt like my pedals were holding me back, that's when I would switch. When I saw someone that I'm like, man, you're the same fitness level as me, you're the same skill level as me, but you're kicking my ass. And the only reason you're kicking my ass is because of the pedals. So that's when I would make that switch. And that moment never really came, but the whole time I'm still thinking like I'm losing something. I'm giving something up by not having clipless pedals. I'm still happy riding, but I'm thinking I'm a second-class citizen on the trail because of it. And then what really got this kicked off was two things involving Aaron Gwynn. Like I was Aaron Gwynn's original strength coach when he started mountain biking. And so one, I did an interview with him, and he made a statement about flats will make you better, clipless make you faster. And it really kind of like just blew people's minds. Like they really like started pushing back on it. And, I jumped in the comments and stuff on posts and started, saying, no, like people were like, well, what do you mean? Clipless make you better. Flats don't do anything for you. And so I was trying to explain what he meant, like, hey, what he means is that flats force you to ride properly. You can't get away with bad technique like you can with clipless pedals. And so that will make you better. But then you get on clipless pedals and they'll help make you faster, because anything you do will work. Right? Their greatest advantage is also one of their biggest drawbacks. The fact that you can pedal any way you want, you can bunny hop any way you want, and it'll work is also why they're a drawback, because it means that you can develop bad habits and not realize it. And so that was what he was saying. And so I was trying to explain that. And then also while I was working with him, I started working with the Yeti World Cup team. And so a bunch of riders riding clipless pedals. And so I go, as a coach, I should look into clipless pedals and see exactly how they work, right? Everybody says they're more efficient. Everybody says they're better. What does the science actually say? Like, what do the studies say? So that maybe I can figure out a way to create programs that will enhance what clipless pedals are doing. So I start looking for the science behind clipless pedals. And that was where, this is around the time like you and I ran into each other, was when I was like, this crazy realization that like people act like you can throw a stick and hit 5 studies that just explain beyond the shadow of a doubt that clipless pedals are better, they're more efficient, all this stuff. They're not there. The studies don't exist.
I saw a lot of anecdotal research when I was, because I spent a lot of time in China. There's a lot of people in China riding flat pedals.
Yes.
Yeah. Doing it with large loads, badly balanced on their bike, and they seem to ride them really efficiently. Or going to, where my training camp is in Italy, where you see nonnas going from the market back up the hill on their bike with their basket and all their produce on flat pedals, and they seem to do it pretty well.
Yeah, man. No, so like I said, I started looking, and I started asking around, and things got even weirder because people started sending some studies my way, but the studies actually flew in the face of what we were told, right? Like the Murnau and Korf studies that look at the pulling up on the backstroke and how that actually produces a less powerful, less efficient pedal stroke.
Are you saying that you should not pull up on the backstroke?
Yes. Yeah. Unfortunately, that sacred cow should be dead by now, but it's not.
We should butcher it and have a barbecue.
Oh, yeah, man. I wish. But see, that's the thing. People don't realize there's actual science about this stuff.
Well, the thing I say to people is if you're on a flat pedal, try pulling up.
Yeah, it doesn't work.
Don't work. Yeah. Well, no, it works kicking you off the bike, or works, but doesn't work on propelling you on the bike or making you, a better cyclist.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to how does the human body optimally function, right? So if you were designing a machine to power a bike, you could make an argument for a push-pull pedal stroke.
Yeah, absolutely.
The human body's not a machine, though. We're an organism, which means that we have pre-programmed preferred ways to create movement. And so our preferred pre-programmed way to create lower body movement is through a strong push with a, more passive, I guess, pull, just simply to get the leg in position to push again.
Well, I think that comes back to, when we talk about our movement stuff and our movement history, that's motor control.
Yep.
So you've got this ability to apply force downward on the pedal and then have motor control on the backstroke, because when you're coming up on the backstroke, you're already pushing down with the other leg. So it's just about controlling the mechanism.
Yes.
On the backside.
Yep. And so that's basically what those studies were finding, is that when you take when you start pulling up on the backstroke, everybody thought you were adding to your power, that you would keep the same downstroke and you were adding to the backstroke. But what happens is when you start to work away from the way the body prefers to move, your body only has so much neural juice to send to what it's doing, right? And so you start sending neural juice towards pulling up with the hip flexor, and you take away some of that neural juice going to the opposite hip for the push down. And so you lose power on the downstroke, and the power that you make up on the upstroke is less than what you're losing on the downstroke. So you're not making up for it with the pulling up on the backstroke. And so, like I said, the studies basically confirm what natural movement in your anecdotal experience. And, every one of us rode flats as kids. This is the thing I say, man, like adults know how to ruin everything, right? Like, you remember that thing you did when you rode a bike as a kid? You rode flat pedals, you never had to worry about your pedal stroke. Everything was fine. You had a blast. And then you grow up as an adult. An adult gets a hold of you and goes, hey, that thing you did as a kid that you had no problem with and you had a lot of fun doing? You were doing it all wrong. Let me show you how to do it. It's fucking adults, man. So so anyways, yeah, I mean, you look at kids, like that's how kids naturally ride a bike, and so again, this idea of trying to introduce this new way of pedaling, trying to outsmart the human body, doesn't work. And so, over the years, I've gotten, other studies, EMG readings that again, look at the pedal stroke. Like the problem is none of this stuff backs up the cycling industry's story about clipless pedals. Like, I had a conversation one time with the old editor at Pink Bike magazine, and the guy told me, like, hey man, we know clipless pedals are a problem. We know they're oversold to the public, but saying something's just going to piss everyone off and it's not going to do anything. So, oh, okay, that's great. Wow. So people in the industry know that they're being oversold, that they're being overhyped and oversold. But then you go to pinkbike.com and you look and it's like, oh, Shimano's buying half the ads, right? Like, there is follow the money, guys. Like, I hate to sound too much like a conspiracy theorist.
Well, it's kind of ironic because Shimano builds flat pedals.
They do, but obviously if you have a company that builds flat pedals and clipless pedals, the party line is that the flat pedals are there for beginners and downhillers. Right? They're not really a serious cycling pedal. Like we're providing this as an option to the cyclist, but we all know, wink, wink, that clipless pedals are what you should be using. Right. And so, you find that, and again, it makes good business sense because I don't believe that clipless pedals could exist in a world where people thought that they were even as good as clipless pedals, right? Like if you thought you could perform just the same between the two systems, the vast majority of people would not use clipless pedals. They would not go through that insane learning curve of falling off your bike and all the crazy stuff that happens if they didn't have to, right? The only reason that you go through all of that is because you have been convinced that on the other side of it is a level of performance that would not be possible without these pedals. That's the only way that the cycling industry can convince people to continue to use clipless pedals. And so they have to hide the science from people because it interferes with that narrative.
But I think there's if you look at the difference between riding on the road versus riding a quote unquote racing bike on the road, riding a commuting bike on the road, riding a mountain bike for performance, riding a mountain bike for enjoyment or exercise, riding a BMX bike. I think that the clipless pedal potential market or potential users is really such a very small subset.
Yes.
And there's so many other things which contribute, like, all day, every day in my studio, I'll have people saying, oh, I have my clipless pedals and I have a lot of trouble getting out of them. And it's like, there are so many other reasons for that, whether the cleat position has been set up badly, you've been sold the wrong type of clipless pedal, and there's certainly, manufacturers out there who make different models, and some of their models are aimed towards a certain market. Say, like one manufacturer who says, well, we have this pedal and it's our light action pedal for women who can't clip out or for people who aren't strong enough to clip out. That pedal in itself is a terrible pedal. The very nature of how much rotation or internal rotation that you have to create, which is a very difficult position for a lot of people to reach, actually makes them more difficult to get out of. But there's all sorts of reasons which are playing into that. But yeah, I think we've been sold that bill of goods that, you're not a real cyclist unless you're on, you're clipping into your
pedals. Yeah. No. And again, even if you're, like you're saying, I think that clipless pedals, the place that they do have it's such a small percentage of riders. You know, the analogy that I use, it's like if you look at professional powerlifters and you watch when they compete, man, they got gear, right? They got power suits and belts and all this stuff.
Right.
Well, they're the best at the world at lifting, right? So that means that every time you go work out, you should put on belt and gear, right? Because that's how the best in the world compete.
Right. Well, that's people's, that's human nature. It's like I worked with a gold medal BMXer who at that level, they wear clipless pedals because they produce so much power they need to be connected to the bike.
Yeah.
But he didn't get there riding clipless pedals for his entire life. He learned to ride on flat pedals, and I think that's what you're going back to Aaron Gwynn's scenario, is that you've got to learn, and this goes back to our movement stuff. You've got to learn the foundational stuff first before you can get to the sexy stuff.
Yeah. No, and that's the thing, man. Is you're, you know, flat pedals are like training raw, right, with no gear. And clipless pedals are like using your gear, putting on your weight belt and your suit. And again, like the cycling world has convinced everybody that, like, you know, every time you go and work out, you need to wear a weight belt. It's like, dude, we laugh at those guys. Like, we know that that's not what you're supposed to do, but we have the same mentality. So, you know, that was another one of these things that I noticed in working with pro riders is that they, you know, I remember talking to Jared Graves. And again, just legend, right? And BMX, you know, 4-cross, dual slalom, you know, the Enduro World Series. So, I mean, just legend in multiple disciplines. And we were talking about clipless pedals, and his attitude towards them was pretty nonchalant. He's like, man, they maybe give me like, you know, 2 or 3%, but, you know, they're not that, you know, basically his attitude was like, give me flats, I'll still kick your ass.
But 2 or 3% at that end of the game is the difference between a gold medal and coming in at the end of the field.
Yeah, but there's a difference though. So they give him 2%, but then you look at your average rider and they give them 60%, right? Like you take their clipless pedals away and they don't degrade 2%. They degrade like 50, 60, 70%. Right. And that was another, that was that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was like another one of my epiphanies is like, oh, there's this difference. You know, the pro riders, even if they use clipless pedals, the skill level between flats and clipless is not very great. It's not a big gap. But then you look at your average rider and this gap is huge. And so again, just goes back to this idea that like the pros actually built their skills with flats and natural movement stuff, and then they're using the clipless pedals to enhance that. Whereas your average rider, that's not the story they're given, right? Like there's this, I don't know if you know who Joel Jameson is, Bioforce or the HRV guy. I was interviewing him for my
HRV guy.
Yeah, but he was, he's worked with a lot of pros in multiple sports. And one of the themes that kept coming up while we were talking is the disconnect between the top level pros and what people think the top level pros do.
Sure.
That the story that the media gives and all of these things is usually not accurate, but the public doesn't know this. And so we're looking at, he was talking about training UFC fighters. He's like, man, every time UFC came in and we had a camp, they're like, can he jump on this box? Can he do this crazy exercise? Can he do that? And Joel's like, well, this isn't what he's actually doing for his training. And they're like, we don't care. We want stuff that looks cool.
Yeah. Sexy. Looks sexy.
Yeah, but then you've got the guy watching the UFC countdown show and he's like, oh, this guy's doing all this crazy stuff to work out. So now I've got to go work out like that.
Dude, we see that right now. You go on YouTube. I had this discussion with a client the other day and he's like, oh, I found this YouTube video of this guy who's a really good mountain biker and I watch what he's doing for his strength training or those Red Bull things you see with Kate Courtney or whatever. Yeah. And they're doing stuff which is, no disrespect to Nino Schurter or Kate Courtney, but they're just doing stuff which is stupid.
Yeah.
Right. And just because they can do something doesn't mean they should do something. And I look at stuff like that and I'm like, I'm surprised they haven't got injured.
Oh my God. Yes.
The way you train from a strength standpoint or any sort of mainly when I look at it from a strength and movement standpoint, the way I train somebody to get them to the professional ranks versus the way I train them to keep them in the professional ranks is totally different.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. When you get into the professional ranks as a coach, you've got to manage that risk reward curve very tightly. Because man, if something goes wrong, and I haven't worked in the UFC for quite a while. I experienced this when if a fight is lost, everybody's looking to point the finger at somebody, right? And it's like, oh, he wasn't well enough conditioned. Oh, his ground game wasn't good. His stand-up game wasn't good enough. Who are we going to point the finger at? And so just because somebody does do something, like here in Vegas, we got, Cirque du Soleil. You look at that stuff, it's amazing. And those people perform incredible acts. But I'll also tell you the flip side of what you don't see is the number of performers they have on the DL on every show.
Yeah.
Like one show in particular, I knew they had, working with one of their doctors, they had 50 performers injured at any one time.
Yep.
And that's because what they're doing is entertainment. That's not, and partly sport at the very highest level is entertainment. But the way your average, weekend warrior needs to train to improve their performance or their enjoyment of a sport is so far apart, poles apart.
Yeah. Yeah, big time, man. But, like you said, unfortunately, that stuff doesn't look good on Instagram. So that's not what people see. But so yeah, man, but that's all that kind of led up to my different realizations with the, flat pedals and like I said, the flat pedal revolution I put out. And then finally I had the idea for the Catalyst pedal. But again, it came about from actually trying to see how clipless pedals were superior, right? And then I found out that we didn't have the science that we were told we did. So this is a Catalyst pedal here. The main difference that you'll see between it and a regular pedal is the length. You have 5 inches of contact space for your foot from front to back here. Your average pedal has about 3 3/4, about, maybe 4 inches if you got a larger pedal. So significantly longer platform. It's no wider than a regular pedal. So one of the things you see with some of these oversized flats, as they call them, that people come out with, is as they get longer, they also get wider. They're just making a square. So they'll be as long as they are wide. The reason that mine isn't wider is because I'm trying to connect both ends of the arch. And so you can see, like, now you can get both ends supported when you stand on the pedal. And so, like I was saying, now that your arch is supported by the pedal itself, it does a lot of different things for you. One of the things that it does is helps improve hip recruitment, takes a lot of pressure off of the knees and the low back and the Achilles tendon. Because that was actually one of the studies that I'd come across. They'd try to look at the ball of the foot versus the midfoot position. And they were trying to prove that the ball of the foot position was better. What they ended up proving was that there wasn't any difference between the two, but the way the body produced the movement was different. And so they found that moving off the ball of the foot took the stress off of the calf and Achilles tendon. Right. And they theorized that it went to the hips, which anyone who's into functional movement knows, well, that's good, right? Like, we want the stress on the hips. Yeah, that's the, so you get, because you've got pressure on the back end of the arch, you're able to get a more stable energy going into the pedal. And so you get better hip recruitment. The other thing I was talking about earlier is really what it comes down to is how many pressure points are you using? And up until this point, we have been using a single pressure point system. The ball of the foot, even clipless pedals, even if you're using a midfoot position, it's still a single pressure point that you're applying into the platform that's your pedal. So even a clipless pedal, even the smallest clipless pedal is still a platform that you're standing on. And so your platform is centered on a rotating axis. And just, a basic, engineering question, if you're trying to apply force into a platform that's centered on a rotating axis, what's going to be the best way to do it. A single pressure point that you have to try to line up perfectly in the center, and that if you get off center a little bit at all is going to result in the platform tipping and moving? Or do you want a double pressure point system where you can apply pressure on both ends of the platform and makes it keeps the energy stable going in? And so as I've gotten into this, I've realized that the problem was never that clipless pedals were better. It's that we had crappy flat pedal design. And that the problem that you were running into with flat pedals that were too small was that your arch wasn't fully supported. You had your heel hanging in space, and then you were creating unstable energy going into the platform. And this is why when you pedal, you see people's toes pointed down. This is a result of unstable energy going into this rotating platform. So how do you fix this problem? Well, one answer is to just, attach your foot to the platform, right? That's one way to do it. If you attach your foot to the platform and you put a stiff-soled shoe on it so that you got some sort of support under the heel and you've got the foot attached to the platform so it can't come off, well, that'll kind of help solve the problem. The other thing you can do is stabilize the energy going into the platform. And that's what happens with the Catalyst pedal and getting the foot position that it allows, because now you've got stable energy going in. So you don't have the foot rotating forward. You don't have the arch flexing. So, all of those things are wasted energy. Even float is wasted energy on a clipless pedal, right? Because that rotational energy should be going into the platform to help create pressure and force into the platform. And, because our bodies are made to create that rotation through the foot into the platform, if you attach the foot and you don't allow any rotation at all, you blow your knees apart. So that's why people have float, is because you have to have some of that rotation, but that's lost energy. That's rotational energy that should be going into the pedal. And so the Catalyst pedal stabilizes all of the energy leaks that you find on a small energy system. You've got the stable arch, you've got the stable energy going into the platform, and you're also able to get better muscle recruitment because of that as well. Now your foot is better stabilized, so your lower body can function better. And so that was the idea behind it, and really, kind of the benefits. As I've gotten more and more into it, like I didn't really realize everything that was going to come from it. Like my feet not going numb anymore. Right. Just all of these things that you didn't realize. The small pedals creating unstable energy creates a lot of problems for your lower body. And so once you stabilize that, then a lot of things get cleaned up. I mean, this is one of the main pieces of feedback we get from people about the pedal is they've had, knee pain, low back pain, ankle, plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, all these issues. And they may have even gone out and sought help, trying to get bike fits, trying to get better shoes and all this stuff. And they start riding these pedals, and within a ride or two, the pain's gone.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting. So just for those people who are watching, just so they get some more frame of reference as far as the foot is concerned, one of the great things about the Catalyst pedal is the foot is essentially a tripod, and there's 3 points of contact on the foot. The foot has 3 arches in the bottom of the foot. So we have what's called the medial arch runs down the inside of the foot. We have a lateral arch running down the outside of the foot. And then we have a transverse arch, which runs across from the big toe to the little toe. So if you think about the foot as those 3 arches, and the back point of the arch of the tripod being the heel bone, the front left or right, depending on which foot we're looking at, the front inside point of the tripod is the big toe, and the outside point is the little toe. And so by stabilizing with this longer platform that the Catalyst pedal has created, by stabilizing that arch, the body will operate at its optimal and its most balanced position. And it doesn't matter whether you're hitting a baseball, serving a tennis ball, throwing a punch, or riding a bicycle. You can do that all in an unbalanced position, but your body will do it more efficiently and be able to deliver more force when it's in a more balanced position. And I think that's one of the greatest things that the Catalyst pedal has brought, is just this ability for people to not stress parts of the body that don't need to be stressed, and use this amazing mechanism, which is our foot. There's 26 bones in the human foot and 33 articulate surfaces, 33 surfaces where bone moves on bone. So it's very, very complex, and it's an amazing design, and we've got to leverage that design to our benefit. And the way it works when we're cycling is different from the way it works when we're running or walking. And there's benefits to both of those. So I think a lot of the issue with the benefits with the Catalyst pedal is it's allowed people to find their point in space. And I think part of the problem with pedals which have clips on them or cleats on them is a lot of people don't understand how to position those cleats. So then you get a shoe with a clipped pedal, and they lock you into this position. So optimally, when you're positioned well with a set of pedals with clips, even if there's float in the pedal, your body won't use that float. It will actually center itself as long as your bike fit professional has done a good job. And the float is there as a safety mechanism. And I think that's partly with the Catalyst pedal as well. You've got so much wiggle room to find your happy place. And because everybody's happy place is different. There's no that's the thing. There's no one size fits all. Humans, I can take your twin brother, James, and look at movement, and you will both move differently. You will both pedal a bike differently, even though morphologically, from the physical size, you are exactly the same. But it's like everybody has their unique movement signature, and the Catalyst pedal just allows you to better use your own equipment, the body or your foot, to develop force production. And it's basically it helps more than it hinders. And I think that's where we've sort of run that issue with pedals with cleats on, is a lot of the time they're just hiding a multitude of sins. And everybody, but in a lot of things, people are like, well, that's just the way it's meant to be, right? And you're like, no, you shouldn't have trouble clipping out your pedals. You shouldn't, have your knees shouldn't hurt. Your foot shouldn't go numb. There's a lot of stuff going on. And I think that the Catalyst pedal allows you, it's the first pedal which is bridging that gap, excuse the pun, between the front and the back of the foot. It's an arch, it's a bridge, and we need to be supported on both ends of it to have our bodies optimally function. The added element of that is your foot has a very high level of proprioception. So there's a lot of feedback, neurological feedback coming from your foot back to your brain. When your foot is well planted, connected, whatever it is, whether it be to the ground or to a platform, which is the Catalyst pedal, the higher quality information coming back is good. It's like, a bad performing pedal is going to be like having bunny ears on your TV, and a good performing pedal like the Catalyst pedal is going to be like you getting 4K through your television. Everything to your brain is just that much clearer. Is that a good analogy of what's going on, James?
Yeah. No, for sure. I remember I may have actually met him at that FMS thing too. There's a guy named Andy Clowers, who is kind of a foot function specialist that I'd had on my podcast many years ago. And he's not even a cyclist. And, his conclusion was the same thing, that like the proprioception in your foot is super important, and you don't want to do things to mess with it. So when you start putting them in, in bad positions, then it's going to interfere with the rest of the way that your body is receiving information and inputs and stuff. And so, man, letting the foot do its thing is, no pun intended. It's the foundation of all functional movement for the most part, especially if you're standing, right? Any standing sort of movement, it starts at the foot. And if the foot, that's one of the things that, as I've gotten along in my coaching career, I've really simplified coaching people. So like when I watch somebody move and they're doing an exercise, I only watch three things. I watch their feet, I watch their hips, and I watch their shoulders. And that's it. Right. And you can tell everything that you need to know by what's happening with that relationship there. but it starts at the feet. And watching someone move, and even if the movement looks really good, but you watch their feet and it's moving around, they're not balanced, they're not planted, then you know there's some sort of compensations and things going on further up the chain. And so, you know, having a good solid platform to move from with your foot is essential. And that is like you're saying, what the Catalyst pedal provides. Like I tell people, it's not just a new pedal, right? It's a new there's a foot position and a type of support that it allows that no other pedal has allowed up to this point. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, when we get people wanting to test the pedal, one of the things we tell them is like, you know, you have to promise to ride in the foot position that we recommend, because early on we'd had people who wanted to review it or whatever, and then they wouldn't change their foot position. They would just keep pushing through the ball of the foot. Well, you're not really going to experience much, you know, that way. It's definitely going to be a bigger platform still, but the real magic happens when you get that pressure on both ends of your arch with your foot. And now all of a sudden the context changes. Like, you know, again, it's hard for people to understand because they're trying to think like, oh, I wonder what this big pedal feels like. And they're trying to think about it based on the context of the experiences that they've had. And the problem is once you stand on a Catalyst pedal, the entire context for your foot has changed. So there's really no way for you to understand what it feels like until you try it, which is one of the reasons that we offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. We are the only company in the entire cycling industry that offers a guarantee. That is how strongly we feel about what we do. But one of the reasons that I do that is because I know that once people try them and they feel them for themselves, that the odds are they're going to stick with it because it is very noticeable. Your very first pedal stroke with them feels different. Your very first ride is going to feel different. Again, like I've lost count of how many emails I get. I just got one the other day from somebody saying, hey man, first ride out, you know, set 3 PRs on a trail that I ride all the time.
Right.
You know, and it's like, wow, you know, it's because your body's able to function better. And there's so many things that happen. So yeah.
Well, it's interesting as well, because you get in that situation where somebody was to try the Catalyst pedal for the first time, even when you change the pedal, if you're you can still be in a bad position on that pedal, right? And you don't know any difference. So if somebody gets on your pedal and the pedal is changing a lot of their interaction, but their balance point on their bicycle might still be off. They might be running, you know, too wider handlebars, which is pulling their center of mass forward. They might be running too long a stem, too much drop. That's pulling their mass forward. So I think a really interesting thing for people to try is when you get on the Catalyst pedal, stand on the Catalyst pedal and get into, you know, what we describe as the attack position. And that's, you know, coming from a mountain bike coach, we're going to be in this dynamic position where our knees are bent and our hips are pushed backwards as if we're going downhill to attack a trail, and moving your hips back and forward, finding where that pivot point is on the pedal axle. And that will sort of can really tell you a lot about how much the Catalyst pedal is actually helping you find that balance. And like I say about, you know, saddles is a big one I talk about. I don't think there's too many really bad saddles out on the market, but I think there's a lot of bad positions which give saddles a bad name. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, that's the one bit of advice I can give to people if they're trying the pedal. Like, you got to find. And I think that dovetails nicely into, you know, what we were talking about from a pedaling mechanic and a movement mechanic, is I don't think a lot of people really understand intimately how to pedal a bike efficiently and where they are in space, which is even more important on a mountain bike than it is on a road bike, because mountain biking is so much more dynamic.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. The not knowing how to, I guess I will. I know what you're saying, but I think that I will counter that I think everybody does know how to pedal a bike properly, right? like good movement is inside all of us. Like, right. We all know how to do it, and that's the thing I tell people when they switch to flat pedals. Like, you're not learning anything new. You're remembering something you forgot.
Right.
We all rode flats when we were kids, right? Like the way that you need to move on the bike, you move that way in other contexts. And
because you're actually forced to move that way by the constraints of the bicycle, because your hands are anchored, and pretty much wherever your hands end up from a center of mass standpoint, and how much, and we'll get into this, people's ability to hinge at the hip, how those two things interact so much with where your mass is on the bicycle.
Yeah.
That, people can, really be challenged. Let's just say that.
Yeah, no, totally, man. And that's again, like people really overcomplicate the skills side of things sometimes. But it's really all, any skill on your bike comes down to the relationship between your center of gravity and the bike center of gravity.
Right. 100%. Yeah. 100%.
So, but again, it's like, that's not the way that most people look at it. They look at it as this, like, series of steps. And the series of steps should simply be a process for you changing that relationship in the way that it needs to be changed to accomplish what you want to accomplish. So if you don't understand what you're trying to accomplish and you're going through step 1, step 2, step 3, then you're not actually going to get the right thing at the end. You're not going to get the result that you're looking for. And so, that ability to move your hips and change your center of gravity. So people will move on the bike, but their hips are basically stuck in space. Right. Their hips barely move at all, even though the rest of their body's moving around a lot, but their hips are really kind of stuck and not moving much at all. And that really affects your ability to stay balanced and move dynamically on the bike. But one of the reasons your hips get stuck in space is if your foot isn't balanced properly.
Yeah. Well, it starts from the foot.
Yep. Exactly.
As a bike fitter, process wise, we start at the foot, we work up and back and then forward. So we work from the foot up, back towards the hips. We make sure the foot's right first, because if the foot's not right, all bets are off.
Yep.
And then we work to make sure the hips are right, because if the hips aren't right, well, we can't really, that's going to hold us back as well. And then we work forward. And the interesting thing, I see a lot on mountain bikers is people, when you talk about moving their hips and you hit it on the head that their hips are locked in space, people think they are pushing the bicycle away from them or pulling the bicycle towards them. What they're actually doing is they're pulling themselves towards the handlebars or pushing themselves away, pushing the handlebars away from themselves. And that's the fine line of why you seek out somebody who has the ability to see movement and understand how that movement interacts with the bicycle, and so how you can take that movement and apply it to riding the bike, whether it be on the road or the trail or the track or whatever. Yeah, no, totally. But even with that, you still got to be careful, because there's a lot of just misconceptions about movement in the cycling industry, and especially in the mountain bike skills training industry. And you end up with an echo chamber where one guy learned it from one guy and then another guy learned it from him. And then you get people just repeating stuff without actually thinking about it. And so one of the things that really drives me nuts is drop your heels. People will talk about you need to drop your heels to get your weight back. And that's backwards, right? Like, you don't drop your heels. What you need to do is shift your hips back. And as you shift your hips back, your weight is going to be biased more towards your heels, and that's going to cause your heels to drop. So this is why, like, when you look at pro riders and they're in this deep attack position and their butt's really far back, and you'll see their heels are dropped a lot of times, but they didn't drop their heels and then move their hips. They moved their hips and the heels dropped in relation to what the hips are doing. Right. And if you just drop your heels, you'll actually take away from your ability to move your hips effectively and modulate where you need your center of gravity compared to where, for the trail. And so, unfortunately, you will run into, coaches who will talk about the hips and you need to get your hips back, but then they'll give you coaching cues like drop your heels to help you with that. That's actually screwing you up and screwing up your movement mechanics and making it harder for you to use your hips properly. And so, unfortunately, man, the cycling industry, especially the skills training industry and in mountain biking, is going through a really, really rough period
right now, because it's exploded, right? Like I remember when I first started mountain biking, there were no skills coaches.
Right.
I remember talking to Gene Hamilton, like one of the OGs in the skills coaching world. And he was one of the first guys doing it. And now it's like, man, everywhere you turn, if someone's been riding for 2 years, I'm a coach. And it's like, it's insane what, how it's exploded and how people have no idea what they're talking about. They're just regurgitating something that they learned at some, certification course or something like that without really truly understanding what they're talking about. And so you're getting a lot of really bad movement advice. I mean, you've touched on it once before, and I'm glad to hear you say it, like the wide handlebar thing. Like, that drives me absolutely up the wall, man. If people really understood, and I have,
right?
What's that?
Gives you more control, right?
Yeah, no, well, it's more control. It's more stable. That's the thing, is it's
stable, right?
More stable. Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's when you talk about the dropping the heels and hinging the hips.
Yes.
If you don't hinge your hips, and if you can't hinge your hips and therefore can't drop your heels, we can get you a dropper post.
Yeah. Well, that can work too. But yeah, that's the dropping the heels. What that does, it forces your body into an unbalanced position. Your body compensates to stay balanced by pushing the hips back a little bit. So it's a way to get somebody who doesn't know how to move their hips to move their hips. But like you're saying, man, you need to learn how to move their hips, not come up with all these different workarounds for it. And that was
constantly get guys I ride with, and we'll ride something, and I'm not hucking big stuff, or I'm a cross country and trail guy, right? And guys I ride with, but we'll ride something technical and really steep, and people are like, "Wow, you rode that without a dropper post?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, we used to ride it with 26-inch wheels and no dropper posts, and it's just when you know how to get your body behind your bike, there's no need."
Yeah. No, you need to move your hips. I mean, that is actually the benefit of a dropper post, is that it gives your hips more space to move.
Right.
Like that's the advantage of a dropper post, is you give your hips more space to move. So now you can move more dynamically if the situation calls for it, but you should be able to move around your seat even if it's up. And so, yeah, just having your butt.
Foundational. Learn to move before you get these extra bits, right? It's like what we're saying about flat pedals and clipped pedals. The top BMX guys, you learn to move your hips around your saddle first, and then if you're going into a type of riding where you need additional movement, then a dropper post might be adequate, not a dropper post on every bike which is pushed out the shop door.
Yeah. It's I mean, I like to stand up to pedal. I'm a big standing pedaling guy, and so for me, I like the dropper post just because I don't use I basically, the way that I look at it is, I got this 4 quadrants of pedaling, right? So if you think about it, you've got high tension efforts and low tension efforts. Okay, just cruising along easy, that's low tension. Having to do a climb, a sprint, right? There's a point where you have to start creating more tension in the body to keep things going, right? So that's high tension. I talk about high tension cardio, right? Because not all cardio is the same. Like doing, low tension cardio is not going to improve your high tension cardio. And this is one of the reasons that riders, mountain bikers, we have a lot more high tension demands on the trail than what you necessarily see in road riding. And so this is one of the reasons that a road riding program isn't going to have the translation over for a mountain biker, because it's not addressing the high tension outputs that mountain bikers need in the same way. And so, but you got high tension, you got low tension, and then you've got standing and seated, right? And so then you'd come up with a quadrant. You'd have high tension standing, high tension seated, low tension standing, low tension seated. And each one of these quadrants has a place, right? So in my mind, like standing high tension efforts, that's the high performance zone, right? Like that's the fun zone. That's where you are. Like if someone's going to bet you money to see how fast you could sprint, like you're going to stand up, right? Like that's where you're able to produce the most power. It's where you're able to move the best. That is your high performance position. Now low tension, standing up. This is what I call the free speed mode, right? This is where just because it's easy doesn't mean you need to sit down. You can stand up and you can pump the berms, you can hit the corners with really good technique. So remember, pedaling, we don't want to pedal. We want momentum,
Mm-hmm.
Pedaling is one way to build momentum and maintain momentum. It's not the only way to do it. Using good form and technique on the trail will do that as well, right? So if you come into a corner and you use bad technique and you blow off a lot of speed, and then you got to pedal real hard to get back up to speed, versus the guy who went through the corner, didn't blow the speed, and doesn't have to pedal as much to come out of it, right? So that free speed aspect, there's free speed all over the trail. Riders just need to know where to look for it to get it, right? And then you've got seated pedaling, and seated low tension pedaling I look at as recovery mode. Like low tension while you're seated is not going to hurt anybody, right? That's fine. But high tension seated, this is where we run into problems, okay? Because now you're laying a lot of tension on a bad position. Like, no matter, if sitting's the new smoking, then like seated pedaling has got to be like doing bong hits a crack, right? Like you can get a really good fit. You can do all of these things, but you're still looking at a less functional position than standing. As soon as you're sitting down, you're leaning over, right? From a functional movement standpoint, your body's not able to move as efficiently.
Closing down the frame, there's a lot of stuff going on, closing down hip extension.
Yep. And so the way that I try to tell riders, and again, this is just, me with mountain bikers, but is to use seated pedaling to recover, right? And then use standing pedaling for your hard efforts and things like that. And try to avoid high tension seated pedaling like the plague, because it is really bad for you to have that as the cornerstone of your riding. Like, that's where a lot of overuse injuries and problems are going to come from, is always sitting down every time things get hard and just laying a lot of tension, because stiffness is cheap stability, right? It's cheap tension. Yes. If your body's in this position and it's always having to stabilize and create tension, your body's going to go, hey, it'd be easier if I just get stiff. And now that's cheap. That's metabolically cheaper for me. And so when you're putting a lot of tension on your body, you want to try to make sure it's in as good position as possible to minimize that. And so, people do take my message a little wrong. Like, again, I'm not saying to stand up all the time. What I'm saying is to think about these 4 quadrants and use the 4 quadrants effectively. And you'll find that your riding will be better, and some of these things will improve as well. But so I like the standing up bit. And so I'll tend to use the dropper post just to just get my seat out of the way, because I feel like I can climb, especially technical climbs. I can climb and move the bike better if I have the seat out of the way than I can if it's up. And so I use the dropper post to make the ride more fun, not to make it easier. Right. Yeah, but yeah, I hear what you mean, man. People get really reliant on those things instead of learning how to just back in the day, we used to just drop the seat. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, we're going to pedal. You have your seat up. Then you get to where you're going. You drop the seat.
Yeah. It's one of the things I love. My Catalyst pedals on my single speed. And that's the ultimate, right? Where you're just in and out of the saddle all the time. And I'm on this really, riding a single speed, you tend to use your body English or body movement more than on a suspended bike, with big travel in the back and big tires, because the one of the purities of riding single speed mountain bike is just, working the bike, right? In and out of the saddle. And that it's very difficult to avoid high tension sitting, right? And a single speed, because you've chosen your gear, whether you're running, whatever your gear ratio is. So yeah, you don't spend a lot of time sitting down, just grinding it out. You're always in and out of the saddle. And that's where I found the Catalysts on my single speed just awesome to roll on. They just makes it so much fun.
Yeah.
So let's address then, if we're talking about strength training, and I know that I sort of hate this, but if for people who want to get something out of strength training, we know we're not going to go, we know we shouldn't go to the gym and sit on a leg press or do knee extensions or hamstring curls. Like, none of those are going to help your cycling. They're probably not going to help your functionality either, because humans move in free space. What are your go-tos as far as strength training as someone who's a mountain biker?
Yeah, man. Well, this is where things may get a little off the beaten path for you, because I've become a huge fan and advocate for isometric training over the last couple of years. And so I had this this moment. I was at a workshop with Steve Maxwell. And again, if people don't know who Steve Maxwell is, and you're in the fitness industry, shame on you. One of the OG kettlebell guys, Gracie Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Guy's just been around, and he's just one of he knows a lot, right? He's been around the block, done it, seen it, and so he knows what works. And so I was at his one of his workshops, and he was getting into the strength training part, and he starts talking about isometrics, and I'm sitting here like, God dang it, man! Like, it's a waste of time. We all know isometrics make you slow and all this other stuff. And so, but as he started talking, man, it started to make some sense. And he said this one thing that really clicked. He said that the skill of creating tension is one thing. The skill of applying that tension to a movement is another. And that was my big aha moment. It's like, oh, there is a difference between the tension skill and the application of that skill to a specific movement. And so the mistake that I feel we've made in the past is trying to use the movement skill to build the tension skill. So for example, something like the deadlift, right? Deadlift's a great exercise, great functional exercise, but doing a deadlift isn't going to make you better at riding your bike, right? Like that, the deadlift itself is very far removed from, you can do some things like maybe stagger your feet or whatever, but in general, it's not riding your bike. But what there is a tension skill that underlies the deadlift, that the hip hinge, the movement skill. Like the deadlift is one application of that movement skill. And so what we've been trying to do though is use deadlifts or lifts to build those foundational movement skills. And so to do that, you try to lift more weight or do more reps. Mm-hmm. But the problem you run into is as you get stronger, the chance of getting hurt gets higher, right? Whenever you're moving, you've got friction and you've got momentum that you have to deal with. You lose control of either one of those things and you can get hurt. And so what isometrics allow you to do is work on the foundational tension skill in a very safe, very effective way. And then you can apply that tension skill to the movement. So what I would do is there's a couple different ways to do it. Like one way that I like is called ramping isometrics, where you start out with like 30 seconds at 50% effort, and then you ramp up for 20 seconds to 80% effort. And then finally you ramp up the last 10 seconds at 100% effort. And again, you're able to go one set to failure. Like this is one of the things, like we know one set to failure works, right? The studies have shown that it works. We've experienced it, but the problem is, like I said,
moving weight, right?
Yeah. So, but the problem, like I said, is that when you do one set to failure, as you get stronger, the odds of you getting hurt get higher. Sure. Okay. And so when you do one set to failure with an isometric exercise, though, you can do it very safely. You can generate a massive amount of tension in your muscles in that movement pattern and not have to worry about the injury side of it. And so now when you go and you do your deadlifts, because I still like to work on movement skills. So I look at isometrics as working on tension skills. And then I look at exercises as working on the movement skill. And just like any other skill is best built at 60 to 80% effort, right? Yeah. Like it needs to be challenging, but it can't be difficult, or else you're not learning. And so this will help you. So if you're trying to work on a movement skill, and so you're using the deadlift to work on the movement skill of picking something up off the ground, you don't need to go over 80% effort. And so this will inherently help safeguard against the injuries, because again, the injuries usually occur when you're pushing the envelope. You're going 90, 100%.
Well,
and so
the injuries usually occur somewhere at end of range. So you're more likely to injure yourself in a deadlift when you're either starting the lift or finishing the lift. And one of the things I really like about the isometrics is it trains you to feel what tension is at the start of the movement and the end of the movement. And so It's like you're getting yourself into position, and this is how I create tension so I can in the right places so I can apply force.
Yep.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. They understand starting force, but they also, they start in this like boneless chicken position where they've got no tensegrity within their body, and then they try to crack a weight.
Yep.
And that's where bad things happen.
Yep. Yeah. So you learn the skill of creating tension through the isometrics, and then you apply that tension through, and really the ultimate application is your sport, right? Like you playing your sport. Like that's the thing. You want to get better at riding your bike, you need to ride your bike a lot, right? Yeah. So it can't be the only thing you do, right? Like that's where the balancing act comes in, but it is the most important thing. And so your training should be supporting your ability to do your sport as much as you can, as effectively as you can, because that's what's going to lead to the progress. And so that's another benefit to the isometrics, is because you don't have the friction element, then the muscle soreness and stuff is nowhere near as much. Like you can do a full-on isometric workout, wear yourself out, and 10, 15 minutes later, jump on a bike and go for a hard ride, and you probably wouldn't even feel it. You probably wouldn't even notice that you've done the workout. So it's a really super effective way for addressing those things, especially for average riders, as you get older. I mean, when you're 20-something-year-old knucklehead in the gym, just banging your head against everything in sight, it's fine. But, as you get older, you got to find more effective ways to do it. And so, yeah, the isometrics are definitely one of my favorites. But so yeah, like I said, isometrics are a cornerstone. And then, with the movement-based stuff, I'm a really big fan of the windmill. Mm-hmm. So, most people will think of it as like the kettlebell windmill. Dan John has a version, the stick windmill, that I really like. But that windmill motion,
doing that with mace as well, or?
Yep, I do it with a mace as well. Yeah. And the mace is fun because the mace will, the effect of the movement of the exercise changes depending upon which side the mace head's on. So if the mace head is on the side pointing to the ground, it's going to feel different than if the mace head's pointed to the ceiling. And so I actually like the stick windmill and the mace windmill. I'm not as big a fan of the kettlebell windmill, mainly because I feel like if you've got hypermobile shoulders, you can get away with some stuff. Mm-hmm. If we take the shoulders out of the equation by using the stick or a mace, then we are guaranteeing that the movement is coming from the areas that we want it to come.
Sure.
And so now once somebody's established that and they can do this, the windmill version or the kettlebell version, then great. But I've just seen a lot of people do kettlebell windmills, and it's like, that's not a windmill. You're kind of bending over and touching your toes and your shoulders in some weird, awkward position. And I think that's why a lot of people shy away from that exercise, is because you are doing some twisting, and if you don't get it right, it can result in injury. But the reality is that movement that you're doing with the windmill, that is the same basic body movement that you're doing when you're cornering your bike. And so, if people did nothing but just start doing some stick windmills on a daily basis, I guarantee within a couple of weeks, your cornering would improve without you having to do anything with your cornering, because you'll have increased the mobility and the proprioception of you with that movement, so that you're able to better apply it on the trail. But yeah, that's still one that it still shocks me, because people have pretty much ripped off everything else that I've come up with and just kind of pass it off as if they don't know where it came from. Right. And I'm still shocked that windmill with cornering is one that hasn't been better accepted, because it is a miracle worker.
I think one of the great things about the windmill, where that carryover becomes, is it really forces you that where your vision goes, right? Where you're looking, following the weight, following where the force vector is. That's what a lot of people lack, I think, in mountain biking for cornering. Because don't learn to let your vision and then your shoulders take you through the corner to the looking on the exit apex and down the trail, which is the great thing that windmills and working with weights at distance force you to do, because you've got to keep your eye on the weight, but that just reinforces that movement pattern, which is so important for riding a bicycle. Yeah,
man. No, I agree. I think that it's a really underutilized movement especially for mountain bikers. So, a lot of people by this time have gotten on the kettlebell swings for body position, kind of doing the attack position thing. That I guess that's kind of one of the things that I really try to do with riders is help them connect like the movements that they do in the gym to what they're doing on the bike, because now you're not just doing strength training. Now it's a form of skills training because you're working on the movement skills that you need on the bike. And so, your basic hip hinge, your lunges, that standing pedaling, your windmill is cornering. Really you can break mountain biking down to just like, 4 or 5 basic movements, and everything you're doing is some combination of these movements. And that's basically it. It's not a very complicated sport.
I think you've hit on a great point there, James, is that when you're talking about strength programs, it doesn't need to be complex. You can do these really simple, fundamental movements, and that's all you need to do. And then and those will make you resilient to the amount of riding that you want to do from a strength standpoint, but also have the added benefit from a movement standpoint of improving your movement capacity on the bike, which is, 2 different things. We don't want to be, as I like to say to people, it's about a continuum. And at one end of the continuum, you have mobility, and the ultimate in mobility is liquid or jelly or whatever you want to call it. And the other end of the continuum, we have stability, but the ultimate expression of stability is not moving. We want to be able to access both those end of range, but we really want to be able to live in the middle so we can move in and out of those particular zones as the demand requires.
Yeah.
Bias too far, like it's like the guy who's done bench press and flies and stuff like that, and he can't, and heaps of bicep curls, and he can't straighten his arm anymore because everything's just so stiff. He's strong for sure, but he's just too stiff. And then the flip side of that is hypermobile, and can't create strength. And I really think we need to find where we can live in that middle point to improve performance.
Yeah, every sport's going to have an optimum mix of that, right? So like a ballet dancer is going to be a different mix than an NFL lineman.
Sure.
But they both need some of it, right? So that but that's the idea, is like, where's that mix for us as riders? And I think along with that too is learning how like getting a volume knob on your muscles instead of an on-off switch.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's another thing that I like with the ramping isometrics, is because one of the hardest things for people at first is, well, what is 50%? What is 80%? And it's like, well, this is something you should be able to do. And you see this with riders. They can't modulate the power of their pedal stroke.
Oh, yeah.
It's either all or nothing. And so this is one of the reasons that they say, oh, I got to be able to pull up on the backstroke, because pulling up on the backstroke is a way of modulating the power. It's producing a less powerful pedal stroke for them. And so they're either pushing hard on the downstroke, or if they need to modulate the power, they start pulling up rather than just simply modulating the power of their downstroke. And so, that ability to the stiffness and mobility, or stability and mobility. Stiffness is cheap stability. So we want stability, not that. And then also just having a volume knob on your muscles is something that you develop. Really, that's one of the things that off-bike training can help you develop faster than what you would develop just riding alone.
Yeah, I think that comes back to the fact that, like your opinion on this, is that strength training needs to be a part of what you do if you want bike riding to be a part of your life for a long time.
Yeah.
Because weak things break easy. That's what I'm very well known for saying. And so we've got to make you strong enough to be resilient to the training load. Otherwise, you won't be able to go out training.
Yep. Yeah. No, man, 100%. I mean, the riding for a lifetime, and I actually ripped that off from Steve Maxwell, because his camp was training for a lifetime, the little workshop that I went to. Yeah, man, no, that your priorities do change as you get older. Like I mentioned, man, I look back, man, and like 20-year-old me, even into like my mid 30s, man, like that guy was a madman. Like, I don't know what was wrong with that guy. Like, that dude was a fool. I mean, the way that he worked out, the way that he rode, I love that dude, but he was a madman, you know, and you can't do that all the time. And so as you get older, you're like, my priorities change. And so now it's not so much about being the baddest dude, you know, on the hill. It's about just getting to the hill and being able to ride. Yeah, exactly. Being able to come home and hang out with your kids and not having your back killing you after a ride. Like, so these things change. And that's really, for me, like, I enjoy those problems. Like, I don't work with any professional riders anymore. Like, my focus has been average everyday riders, because that's who I relate to. Like, I've never, you know, with me, like, I've never been competitive. Like, I understand on some level, but like, I don't think that mountain biking lends itself well to competition, because it's really not you versus the other person. It's you versus the trail. It's you versus the mountain.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's that inner journey that really is the important thing that I find with riding. And so, but yeah, man, that just, you know, having that perspective on it.
Man, I'm so enjoyed talking with you. This is, and like I've said to a lot of people, we are going to have to do a second round on this, because there is so much more that we can unpack and share with people, which I think is really valuable. And it's one of the things I've really been pushing is there is so much bad information out there right now that I think it's really important, and the onus is on those of us who have been true professionals to get out there and share the knowledge, the actual facts of the stuff which actually works, and the message that we want to be here for both a good time and a long time, and creating your fundamentals and really being, you know, honest about what you need to work on is a critical part of enjoying any sport, whether it be, you know, if your high performance activity is getting out of bed in the morning, or your high performance activity is going out and crushing a mountain bike trail or a road bike or whatever. You know, we need to bring that information to people. I think there's certainly a lot of this is just so beneficial to everybody.
Yeah, man, I totally agree. Yeah, the proliferation of fitness influencers that are like, you know, 20-something-year-olds on Instagram, and it's like, this is a ridiculous world we're living in here, folks. But so it's up to people who've actually done it to help share that knowledge, for sure. And that's the cool thing about, you know, this day and age we live in, man, being able to do podcasts and stuff like that. So. But yeah, no, it's, I agree.
So if people want to get hold of you, James, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and get hold of you if they want to know more information?
Really, bikejames.com. That's the best place to go. You know, you can email me at james@bikejames.com. I'm always happy to help. I mean, it's what I'm here for, man. I love helping people. And, but yeah, on the website, you can sign up for the newsletter. Like I said, I send out 2 or 3, you know, pieces of, you know, good articles or posts or videos and stuff every week. You've got a ton of free workouts and stuff you can sign up for and check out on the site. So it's just a treasure trove of good training information for mountain bikers. And so, yeah, you can find me out there. I mean, we're on Instagram at MTB Strength Training Systems and Facebook at MTB Strength Training Systems as well. But I'm definitely most active through my email newsletter and stuff like that. So that's the best spot.
Fantastic, man. I hope people take advantage of that and find out some more information.
Oh, and pedalinginnovations.com. I forgot. Yeah, so you can find out more about the Callus pedal.
Yeah, the pedal thing, you know.
Yep. Yeah.
But hopefully everybody's got some nuggets out of this one and they've enjoyed listening along. Thanks for tuning in. Anybody who's taken the time to watch it. Thanks again to Bike James, and thanks to the Catalyst pedal for making my riding that much better. And I'm Greg Choate with Standish Sports Science. Thanks for joining us on Fit Matters, and we will let everybody know soon on the socials about our next episode. Hope you have a great day. Ride safe. Be nice to people, and we'll see you all again soon.
Heck yeah.